Hello. I'm very excited today to have you join us, and I'm going to be joined by my dear colleague, Adam Holman. And I've got a tremendous story for you. I don't know if you've ever been up against it in life where things seem so stressful, so overwhelming. You just thought, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. And people sometimes ask me too, as a shrink, well, do you ever have to practice what you preach, David? They fantasize that life is all smooth for me. But I can tell you that my life has been filled with traumas and stressful events. And I'm going to tell you about one of the most overwhelming in today's story. And it had a very unexpected twist. But one of the kind of stresses that I've had, you see, early in my career, I handled very, very difficult cases because a lot of them were referred by the clinic of a colleague, Dr. Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive therapy. And they got tremendous numbers of referrals. But when they had really, really difficult cases, they kind of referred them to me. And often these were patients with what's known as borderline personality disorder, and many psychiatrists and psychologists won't accept them because they're so challenging and so difficult. This patient was no exception. And like the first time he called me, it was the Christmas Eve. And he said that he lived in the Midwest and that he had just sold his house so he could afford psychotherapy, and that he had a gun to his head,
Oh, wow.
and that if I didn't accept him as my patient, he would pull the trigger.
Wow.
And that's called manipulation, and that's one of the features of borderline personality disorder. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but we all have, things that we tend to do, and maybe due to a lack of self-confidence, he was feeling like he had to threaten me, or else I would reject him, or something like that. But it was very, very frightening, and eventually. But I said, I'm filled up right now, but I have a wonderful young colleague, Dr. Jackie Persons, and referred him to her. And they worked together for a number of months until she moved back to California, and then she referred him back to me. And I really liked him, but everything I was trying was not working, and he was resistant and defeating me, and his scores on the depression test and the suicidal urges test and the anger test and the anxiety test were always sky high at the start and end of sessions.
I will say too,
Yep.
my two greatest fears as a therapist, and we do experience a lot of fear show up right there. One is having one of my clients end their life, and
Yeah.
two
Oh,
is
yeah.
repeatedly working with someone and realizing that I'm not being effective and that
Yeah.
I'm failing them. And
Yeah.
yeah, I end up
It,
really just in cycles of
it,
thinking about it and
yeah.
thinking about it.
It's the dark side of our profession. Our profession has a lot of joy. Nothing gives me greater joy than working with someone and seeing them go from tears at the start of the session to laughter and joy at the end. And now that I'm kind of an elderly fart with a lot of experience, that happens most of the time. But in the early days, it took many, many sessions often to get a breakthrough for some of these challenging individuals who I often liked greatly, but they were a constant threat and stress for sure. But at any rate, my book Feeling Good had just come out in 1980, and I was so proud of it and so excited about it. But I couldn't get anyone to support it with publicity. The publisher wouldn't support it. The day it was published, my editor called me, Maria Guarnaschelli, and said that 9/10 of our books fail, and we only make money on that one that makes the big time. And so the president of the company puts together a loser list, and these are the books that they won't support because they've determined they have no commercial potential. And your book is number one on the loser list.
Oh,
And so you're going to have to try to promote it yourself because he won't invest any money because he thinks the book has no, a book on depression has no commercial potential. And so I was doing my best, and I didn't know public relations, and I would call a TV show or a radio show and get rejected. I probably got rejected, I would say 3 or 4 thousand times.
Wow, what was that like for you, David?
It was just I didn't mind. I just figured this is what I have to do, and eventually maybe someone will give me a break. And then Maury Povich, who later became a national kind of celebrity on television, was just getting started, and he had some kind of Good Morning Philadelphia show or something, an hour talk show. And I think someone I had worked with who had a tremendous response knew him and said, "Boy, you should get this guy on your show." And so the producer called. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to be on the show." And so they put it in the TV Guide, which was the little magazine that everyone used to get and to see what's coming up. And they said, "Dr. David Burns is going to be on the Maury Povich morning show with he's going to show everyone how to feel good." And so that was very exciting. And so that morning, I had called a taxi to pick me up at 7:30 because I had to report for the show at 8 o'clock. So you get makeup and all this kind of thing. And so I went into my office, I called the taxi, and I was checking my answering machine. And there was a message from this young man, and the taxi was actually waiting for me right outside the building. And his message was that, "Dr. Burns, I wanted to thank you for all the help that you've given me. Uh, I know you've tried your best, but I just wanted you to know that while you're on the Maury Povich Feeling Good show, I'm going to be committing suicide. But I don't want you to worry about me because there's no way you can call the police, but I've left my apartment. Nobody knows where I am, and so there's no way you're going to be able to stop me. But have a really good show." And I was totally freaking out. I didn't know what to do, he was a smart guy. I knew there was no point in calling the police. So I said, "Well, I've got to go down and do my thing, and just let life goes on, and we'll see what happens." But I was just really freaking out. I said, "How am I going to make this a feeling good show? I feel like crap. This was like the worst moment of my life."
Yeah.
And so I got in the taxi and went down there, and Maury Povich he was really a nice guy. I was surprised. A lot of these big name people are kind of, arrogant and narcissistic. He was kind of narcissistic. He had all kinds of people combing his hair as I just did, and making him look just perfect. But he came in and he was real kind and real nice to me, and said he was happy that I was on the show, and they had a live audience. And so we went out and he introduced me and said, "Dr. Burns is going to show us all how to feel good. And doctor, take it away." And there were about 20 people in the audience. And I said, a lot of us suffer. Life has joyous moments, but it has a lot of challenges for all of us. And you feel like you're not as successful as you want to be or as loved as you want to be. And I've been developing new ways to help you change the way you feel so you don't cave in and fall apart. But people look at me and they say, "Oh, you're a psychiatrist, you're an author, you must have life so easy." But I can tell you, being a psychiatrist is probably one of the most stressful professions in the world. They say it's even worse than people who are, in the towers managing airplanes coming in and out. It's even more stressful than that. I'll tell you what just happened to me. And one of my favorite patients who I really care about, he's probably angry with me or something like that, and he left a message that he's going to commit suicide while I'm on this show right now. And I'm totally freaking out, and it's my head is filled with negative thoughts, and my heart is filled with negative feelings of concern and worry and guilt and shame and you name it. I'm feeling it. And I'm wondering, how about you folks in the audience? Have any of you had really stressful events in your lives? And then everybody opened up and they started talking about, my son was suicidal, and I can remember, he made a suicide attempt, and it was so heartbreaking to me. And he survived, but this was the most hellish moment of my life. And other people talked about their stresses, and it was just like a wonderful, wonderful show, a very, very uplifting. And then at the end, I thanked Maury, and then they had a car waiting for me, and they drove me back to the Gerard Bank building where my office was on the third floor and dropped me off. And I went up, and there was another message on the machine, and it was from this same fellow. And he said, Dr. Burns, I was out driving around, and I decided before committing suicide that I would stop at a local bar because I knew they had a TV, and see if I could tune in the show and see what was happening. And he said, I stopped and watched the show. And
No.
I just want you to know, I thought it was a tremendous show. And and I've changed my mind about committing suicide, and I really want to see you as soon as possible. And if you have any openings this afternoon, I can make it to your office. And I couldn't believe my ears. And it was such a joyous experience. And then we started working together really effectively, started cooperating for the first time, and doing his homework. So there's a really important take home message for all of you, because I'm sure that you too have had, you know, painful, traumatic experiences. I call it getting kicked in the stomach by life. And it happens to all of us. At least I think it happens to all of us, and it's usually pretty unexpected. But there are some big take home messages here. And Adam will now point out what some of those is, and we can just talk about it a little bit and see what does this have for you who's watching right now.
Yeah, I just think about how hard he must have been kicked in the stomach to
Oh,
be
yeah.
trying to let you know how bad he was hurting and how angry he was in the way that he knew how to, which was to send you that message, and then how much that kicked you in the stomach.
Yeah.
To some degree, it had the effect that he was
Yeah. He
hoping,
wanted
which
me
is
to
that it
hurt.
caused you pain. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was successful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we think feeling great means that we're going to feel good and happy all the time, when in reality it means that we're able to feel the truth of what we're feeling in that moment. And when you shared that with the crowd, everyone else started to share their feelings
Yeah.
with
Right.
you, and it was actually the genuineness of allowing yourself to feel the hurt and
Yeah.
feel the shame.
He made for a successful TV show.
Yeah.
And also for his own successful therapy. And I think that, he was clearly angry with me and trying to hurt me, and he was successful. But why was he trying to hurt me? Probably because I'd been throwing techniques at him and
Mhm.
not responded with my heart and my feelings and showing that I cared about him, and that I was profoundly concerned about him, and that probably touched his heart to then he was open to using the techniques I was teaching him. And he said, David cares about me, or Dr. David, or whoever I am.
Yeah, finally he could see that you care for him on the big screen, and I think the other thing that really stands out to me is in that moment that you decided to share what you're feeling, you had the whole audience sharing with you, and what could have been this kind of dry, stale
Yeah,
show about how great you feel all the time became
yeah,
a really true and deeply connected show
yeah,
about,
yeah,
how we all feel, and for him to see that and to be watching you, David, talking about him, it sounds like he had the opportunity to see that you do care about him and
yeah,
care about him very deeply, and also feel a lot of hurt over the fact that he's hurting.
yeah. And one thing that I was trained to do when I was a psychiatric resident, and I can say, I don't mean to say that this overly hurtfully, but I trained at Stanford, I've taught at Harvard Medical School, and I trained at University of Pennsylvania in my residency. And I had psychoanalysts supervising me, and one thing they said to me is, "Don't ever share your feelings
You know,
with your patients.
I was trained to do
You
the
know,
same.
just be a mirror back what they're saying." And I can tell you that in my experience, and I was probably clumsy in my psychoanalytic skills. Well, I can guarantee I was, because it felt so assholish not to share my feelings, be hiding my feelings. Patients would say, how are you feeling, Dr. Burns? You never say anything. And my supervisors would say, don't say anything to your patients. But here was a time where when my patient finally saw how I was feeling, it actually broke things wide open. Well, what are the, in a good way, and what are the take-home messages for you? Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you've experienced depression, hopelessness, anxiety, guilt, shame, inadequacy, aloneness, abandonment, hopelessness, discouragement, anger. I was feeling all of those things at the 100% level. And I know that if you haven't been feeling those things, you know, you're you're either a weirdo or a liar or both, because I don't know any. I've only known one person who claimed he was happy every instant of his life, but most of us suffer, and sometimes that suffering can bring us closer together. But suppose somebody is watching now, and they would like maybe you'd like some help, and that was the technique, the self-disclosure, the sharing, the opening up. That's one of 150 techniques I use to help people.
What is the Feeling Great app? Why should people check it out, David?
I don't know. It sounds like a lot of bullshit to me. No, I'm just pulling your leg. But I've had the idea ever since the late 1970s, when I first learned about cognitive therapy and now the new team CBT, that if I could just get somebody to help me train a computer to do electronically what I do in actual therapy sessions, that it could be a world-changing thing. And it took me 40, 50 years to find a crew of people to create this monster, you might say. And you're one of them, and Jeremy Carmel is one of them, and Jason Mino is one of them, and several others on our team. And what we've created is a little kind of version of David, what I do in therapy sessions. When I'm working with someone, I generally see a complete elimination of symptoms in one session. It has to be a 2 hour session, because I can't do it in 45 minutes or an hour. But we've trained the computer using AI, but a highly trained version of AI, not the thing that you can log into, but something quite unique that does exactly what I do in a therapy session. And our data shows dramatic changes for people with less than 90 minutes. Most people of the first experience with our little Dr. David app.
So now you may be wondering, if this is an AI-powered chatbot to help you with your mental health, why don't you just talk to ChatGPT? And first off, I think that's a great question. ChatGPT does a really good job of giving understanding. And while that's really important, understanding alone is not enough to feel better. And so with our therapy-minded approach, we've added a whole bunch of extremely powerful tools to not just help you get understanding, but actually feel good. And so this process is structured, it's specific, and doing so produces real results to the degree that we're actually really surprised at how effective it has been. And I'm kind of ashamed to admit that sometimes it even performs better than I do as a therapist. And so if you would like to feel great, and gosh, do we ever want you to feel great, please download our app on Google Play or the Apple Store.
That's what it is, and you can check it out for free. You can take a free ride on it, and if you like it and think it's awesome, you can get a year subscription, which costs $99, which is maybe a lot of money to some of you, maybe not so much to many of you, but we're really talking about changing your life dramatically and fast. And if you can't afford it, contact us and we'll give it to you for free, because I want you to change the way you think and feel. I want you to feel good as well. And so now we just have one spectacular closing comment from Adam.
At the bottom of this, it's important to recognize that It's okay to feel the way that you feel. And when you recognize that, you can change the way you think. And when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel.
That's a great point, Adam. Well said. And thank you all for watching. We love you all, and stay tuned because there's a lot more where that came from. Bye bye.